I am humbled to be here. These brains that you've been watching all day are kind of blow me away. And it's fun to be here. And when I watch these TED Talks, and when I just sat as an observer through the whole day today, I've got a huge question. Intellectually, the ideas are there. The problems in some ways are solved, or at least partially solved. So where's the gap? Because the game, it's not changing, right? Things don't change. They are changing to some degree, but there's a gap between what we know and what we're able to institute. And so my passion is developing people, and I think there's a relationship here for us. And I think that relationship is that it's not just the problems that we need to have innovation around, not just the ideas that we need to innovate, but we need to innovate ourselves. Because it's not just what we know that makes a difference. It's how we know what we know. And this is a hard talk to give in a short period of time, and the only time I've ever done it was on the back of a napkin over a lunch table. And so I thought that maybe a creative way to do this would be on the back of a napkin. And so we're going to take that route today. The journey we're on and the way that we know things are kind of like we all have a lens that we see the world through, if that makes sense. We can't take a perspective on that lens. But those lenses change over the course of our lives. They grow, they become more complex, there's more experience in those. And in fact, we become more effective when we measure the most effective leaders in the world. They are the most highly developed in terms of the way that they see how they know what they know, the way that they see the world. And so if you think about our lives as a journey, and it's nowhere near as neat as a straight line, okay, but if you think about our lives as a journey, there's several things that we know about it. There's a starting point for us, and there's an ending point for us. And there are stops along the way that are definable, that we can know about. And each one of those stops has characteristics that we can say as though we were going from Atlanta to the California coast. That we can say, well, this is like we're leaving the Southeast, and now we're going through Alabama, and we're hitting the Mississippi River, and these are landmarks that have all sorts of landscape in between them. So it's not like we just take one step from the next step to the next, but it is a journey. It's a continuous journey, and theoretically, there are an infinite number of points of development. But there are characteristic points in ways that we can understand ourselves. And the key here, and the reason this is relevant, is because it's not until we get to the highest levels that we really see an impact in leading the kind of change that we want to see to lead the world. And so many of you may have read Collins' Good to Great. I want to put a disclaimer on the front of this as we are not talking about the same thing. This is based in several centuries of research, which has most recently been called constructive developmental theory, starting with the likes of Piaget and through Erickson and Kohlberg and Keegan and Gilligan and Levinger, and you can look up the names later, but great thinkers. And they have recognized that there are different levels of development, and that those levels of development relate to complexity and our ability to step away from our old ways of seeing things, from the ways that we're committed to, and moving forward. So if I can just lay out this map real quick, because I think it's not only useful in helping us plot our own position on the map, but it's helpful in giving us an idea of what the next appropriate step for us to take, even as we try to innovate ourselves. And so what happens is that we start at a very young age, at age 5, with the lens of our understanding being our perceptions. What we perceive to be true is the thing that's true. This is why you can trade 3 pennies for a dime to any 4-year-old you can find, right? They don't get it. They don't understand that there are facts and realities that govern the world that are real things, that a dime is, in fact, in our system worth more than 3 pennies. So they're bound by their perceptions, but eventually those perceptions get challenged, right? There's like new data that comes into their world, and this lens of thinking this way doesn't work anymore. And so it is in the challenge, the contradiction to their understanding, if you will, that they move to the next level. And this next level, in the normal course of development, 10 years of age is when most people tend to reach this development, is it's a world about rules and law. It's kind of a black and white either-or understanding, right? And it has a real win-lose deal to it. I have a a child that just turned 12, but a couple of years ago, he was really living in the throes of this. His whole world was about, did he get rewarded or did he get punished? And there's something that we can even celebrate, even as it irritates us in a 10-year-old, that the idea that it's the gold star, it's what's in it for me, but we can also enjoy them just enjoying life, doing what they want to do, living a kid's life. That's a great place to be. Where this gets weird is about 10% of the adult population never grows beyond level 2. Real statistics, okay? This is the dictatorial leader. This is the leader that you've worked with before, that it's all about their agenda. It's all about whether they win or lose. And it is a very simplistic way to understand the world. And there are leaders of countries that are level 2 leaders. They're making sense of the world like my 12-year-old, right? That's difficult. So what happens if we're going to keep growing, if we're going to go beyond level 2, we have to start to realize the world starts to challenge this understanding that it's a black and white sort of win-lose reality. There's sometimes I can't always win, right? And to move beyond that now, that's very destabilizing. So where's the next place that I'm going to go? And the next place on this journey is characterized by what we call relationships. We need help making sense of this new world that's been sort of ripped out from under us as this goes away. Initially, it's peer relationships. This is why peer pressure is so big in the teenage population. But this is something that we don't even really settle on until our early 20s. This is when we become fully what we call level 3. Okay, and so as we go, it becomes not only the peers, but our mentors, our parents come back into the equation, even though we push them out initially at the beginning, and our ideologies, our political, our religious, our social ideologies define how we understand the world. And so when you begin to think of level 3 people, it's like they don't really have relationships. They are those relationships. As my friend Bob Keegan has said, that we are our relationships at level 3. And so what begins to happen is that in the normal course of development, this is, again, a beautiful thing. It's stereotypically, it's kind of the fraternity or sorority president, that it's like they get the culture, right? And maybe they've got some communication ability, and maybe they're good looking, and maybe they have a few other sort of skills, charisma skills about them, but they are embodying the ideology. The young Republicans in college, I love messing with them. It's a really fun group because when you start to push on how deep that understanding goes, and it's not just them, it's also the young Democrats too. Let's just be clear here. That the thing is it's an outside-in understanding. It's not theirs. They don't own it from the inside. So eventually, and you guys, I can tell looking at the age of this audience, most folks are here, is that they're starting to say, you know what, it's not as easy as the 3-ring binder said it was. And that is, again, very destabilizing, right? And so we have to move to the next stage of development, which is going to become an inside-out understanding. It's what am I going to hold to be true for myself? What am I going to believe about this? And in the way this comes together, what we do is we wind up having crossing over a barrier that we call the effectiveness transition. All of the research we're doing now with 360, with subject matter expert ratings, with subordinate ratings, with self-ratings, are showing that we are really not effective in leading the change that we want to lead until we become more inside out than we are outside in. It's got to be ours, because when the new and complicated circumstances come up and it's not in the 3-ring binder, then we've got to have a self, a place that we're leading from that comes inside of us. So we can measure this in people. This begins to happen for most folks around 40 years of age. They become self-authored, what we call self-authored. They determine what their way is that they're going to understand the world from. They are authoring or shaping, if you will, their own lens. And this lens is their way of seeing the world. Now, here's what's really interesting. Because this happens kind of at this stereotypical midlife age, we also call this sometimes the midlife transition. And that's a hard thing to go through. It's difficult work for everybody to sort of let go of the cultures and ideologies that define them, even though the content of those ideologies may not change. If I was a young Republican or a young Democrat, I can bring those inside of me and own those and not change the ideology. Does that make sense? And so what we're doing is that we're going through this midlife transition. The way we turn a midlife transition into a midlife crisis is that we find a new set of outside sources to define us. We don't do the growth necessary to bring it inside of who we are. And so Hollywood portrays this with the sports car and the trophy wife and the spray-on tan and the new tired of the minivan. I'm done with all that. I need a new set of outside sources. But there's a danger in this self-authored way. And I see it all the time with people who have really thought through great things, is it's this way is the way to solve the problem. But what that does is it creates tension, and Greg would say that that tension can lead to a solution, and I agree with that this idea that conflict coming together actually can help us move to a broader, more comprehensive solution. But what happens is that in order to keep growing to level 5, we've got to give up our way. Not give it up forever, but we've got to be able to take that lens off, just like we've had to at every previous level of development. We've got to be able to take that lens off and look at it objectively and say, what is it? Is it this or is it someone else's way? And as I can begin to look at my own lens objectively, then I am able to make a better, more complex decision. Because when I'm at level 4, I have the benefit of all of the outside influences from my 20s and 30s and even teenage years. Plus, I have an understanding of the rules and order and my desire to win. But those things don't define me like they define someone at level 2, or like the relational influence defines someone at level 3. They are things that I can take a perspective on. They are old lenses for me. They don't limit my understanding. So the question is as we get to level 5, what holds us together, right? What's the lens that defines us at this stage? And this is an integrated, higher order set of values. When we look at level 5 people, when we look at level 5 leaders, what we see is we see on kind of a global scale, we see the Martin Luther Kings, we see the Abraham Lincolns, we see the Gandhis. But what we see on a local level is that sage aunt or uncle or grandparent or neighbor down the street that just seem to get the world. Because if we arrest our development at level 4, and this is an astounding statistic, it doesn't matter how long you live, only 90% of the people arrest their development at level 4 or below. They just grab hold of that way. I was successful. The world worked for us using that way. And these are the cranky old people in the retirement communities. You've all met them. They're the ones that I had a little blue-haired lady, sweet looking, I think she was even a minister's wife at the retirement community my grandparents looked at, use the F word with me about how my generation was tearing up the world, right? It wasn't the way they did it back then. She was locked in to her way, her understanding, and she could not take a perspective on it. But when you meet that sage person, when you see and read the first person words of Abraham Lincoln or of Martin Luther King Jr., you see them rising above the fray, right? You see them rising above their way. Martin Luther King, I just reread the letter from the Birmingham jail. Oh my gosh. Okay. In that letter, he talks about the idea that equality and freedom does not equal desegregation. Okay. He recognized that the way of achieving freedom and equality was different than the higher order value of freedom and equality. So if we are going to begin to make changes, and if we are going to begin to lead the change, all these great ideas, we've got to start seizing challenges in a new way. I mean, we've got to get to a place where we recognize that the challenges that have always helped us grow throughout the entire course of our lives, the challenges to our perceptive stage as a 5-year-old, the challenges to the me first orientation at level 2, the challenges to being defined by an outside source at level 3 have always been the things that pushed me to the next level. It's pushed all of us to the next level. And so our goal is to seize challenges. And let me tell you, in case no one knew this won't be a newsflash, we all face challenges. That's part of being human. And the biggest challenges are the ones that shape us the most. You ask someone who's down the road a ways and they're living a life, and it has been the hardest things that have shaped them the most, that have made them feel, that they attribute to their growth the most. But the people who accelerate their development beyond just the odds that life throws at you are those folks who seize the intentional little challenges every single day, having lunch and trying to understand the perspective of someone who disagrees with you. All of this incredible, world-changing thinking about the environment, if we cannot step out of that perspective, and in order to fully step into the perspective of business and profitability and corporations and conservatism and all of these different things, we can't rise above. The best we can do is manage our differences. It's my way or their way, and how effectively can we manage those differences? So if we want to change the world, if we want to change our country, if we want to change our organizations, if we just want to change our families and our marriages and the way things are going with our kids, we've got to start by changing ourselves. Seize those challenges. Abraham Lincoln, I'm going to end on this quote, I love this. He said, you got to do your own growing regardless of how tall your granddaddy was. So that's it. It's up to us, right? We've got to take it. It has been a privilege to share this with you guys, and thank you very much.